world is going through an expansion of consciousness, a changing of the ages, and many of us are on an awakening journey. I want to explore what all of this means and share people's personal stories so we can relate, enjoy the mystical experiences, and perhaps connect some more dots. Everyone's journey is completely unique. I'm your host, Wendy, and this is Light Always Wins. Welcome, everybody. Today I have a special guest, Steve Herbert. Steve, I have to tell you really quickly, you're my first male guest. So, yeah, I'm excited about that and honored to have you here.
Yes.
Steve is a geologist and anthropologist, and he's been dowsing since 1985, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and I actually met Steve at a local dowsing meeting, and it was interesting because within like the first few minutes of meeting you, somehow the Wizard of Oz came up in our conversation, which was just wild because that movie slash book holds a lot of significance for me. And I actually grew up watching it every night as I went to sleep. And so it was really ingrained in my consciousness. And then as I got older, like throughout my life, more and more pieces have come together from it. And just like in the past couple of years, as I've sort of deepened my spiritual journey, I started to see the esoteric significance. And so I just thought it was kind of wild that within the first few minutes of meeting that this came up, and you said, I've actually written a paper about the Wizard of Oz and the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the similarities. And I was like, wow, I've got to read that. And so Steve shared it with me. I read it, and I have to say, like, it was really cool because it really required more than just my intellect to read it. It almost puts you in a bardo state, like an in-between state while you're reading it,
Yes.
you know? And so I will be sharing a recording of myself reading the paper so you guys can hear it. And I'll probably put that in before this interview so you all can listen to it and then hear our conversation about it. But yeah, I'm really excited because it's not often that I find people that I can really dive this deep into these kind of topics with. So before we dive into that, though, I would love for you to share some of your background and how you ended up on the path to writing a paper such as this and all the work that you do.
Well, I think just have to go back to just saying that I born and raised in Littleton, New Hampshire, and I didn't go to college right away. It's been a few years adventuring before I got to college, but when I got to college, I ended up majoring in geology, but I had also a minor in archaeology and anthropology. So when I graduated, it looked like I made the best choice I possibly could have. The field was booming, and at that time I could start right off and earn good money and move up the ladder fast. And I moved from New Hampshire out west, and I, after graduation, and worked first in mineral exploration and then in the oil field as an oil field geologist. And but the whole thing turned upside down when around the end of 1981, there was an oil glut that put all of us geologists, or most geologists, out of a job, me included, or I could see it coming. So I made plans for that, and I decided to go to graduate school and maybe wait it out that way, but there are so many other geologists doing the same thing that it was too competitive for me to get into graduate school for geology. So I thought, well, I am just going to follow another passion and pursue archaeology and anthropology. And my idea was to become a geoarchaeologist. But you know, through all of this, I could feel like a divine hand guiding my life, and I was guided to go to the University of Montana for my master's in anthropology, and but I was steered away from the archaeology part, and I ended up in social and cultural anthropology. And as time went on, I felt myself specializing even further to religious and psychological anthropology. And then I was thinking of doing a master's thesis in one of the reservations around me, maybe with a medicine person like that. The chair of my committee suggested, well, why don't I do it on Pentecostalism? And there are several groups in the area, and after a while, I thought, well, that's not a bad idea. It's pretty similar, and they're both groups attempting to tap into some kind of a greater reality to manifest knowledge and abilities that were not normally available in our 3D world. So I spent 9 months circulating among 7 Pentecostal groups in the Missoula area. And sometimes I just would stop and think, how did this happen? I started studying rocks, and here I am studying this Holy Spirit. So I went. Yeah, I did also. I considered that work, both field work and research work, and it was also a cross-cultural comparison. And field, I was able to have do something in the field with the Native American church, the peyote religion, but otherwise I did a lot of my research reading on cultures all over the world and back through time. And so as a scientist, I had to do this objectively, but I also had to be fully immersed. And so in that immersion, I witnessed, a lot of amazing things and experienced some really amazing things. So when I finished that degree, I could feel the doors closing to being in Montana. As much as I love Montana, the woman I was involved with, we parted ways, and that fell apart. And I couldn't find a job, and I was running out of money. So this was my dark night of the soil. The dark night of the soul.
I love that slip.
Being in agriculture too, I guess that was maybe appropriate, but
Totally.
I went back east and tried to figure out what else to do with the rest of my life. And I did a lot of writing. I rediscovered my love of writing through doing my thesis. And I wrote an article called "The Mystic Light." and it was inspired by experience I had among the Pentecostals.
Mm.
A magazine called the Earth Star Press published it, and then they asked me to go to the convention of the American Society of Dowsers, and as a reporter. So I went with a press pass and I covered the convention and took the 2-day basic dowsing school that preceded that. And what happened was I was hooked totally, and I've been an active member since. But they never published the article.
Mm.
And but it just showed to me that the objective really of this divine hand guiding my life was to get me to the American Society of Dowsers and into. So I continued while I was sorting out my life, continued researching and writing, and I researched subjects about during my reading research for Pentecostalism, I kept running across all kinds of references for beliefs in the soul as a multiplicity, not a unity, and that fascinated me. And I researched that thoroughly and did a lot of writing on that. But during this time, there was one night when I was walking through the living room and intending to go out in the evening and spend some time with some friends. But the TV was on and The Wizard of Oz was just starting to come on. Something told me to sit down and watch it. Also, I'll note that at this time I was in the middle of reading the Bardo Thadal, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And as I watched the movie, all these connections started flooding into me. And once the movie was done, I just furiously wrote down all the notes of what was coming to me. And this really felt like a thing coming to me by inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote that article, and I've got maybe 150 articles published, thus far, and still that remains one I'm most proud of.
Wow. That's amazing. And as you speak, I'm like, I can't wait to read what else you've written.
Well, I'll give you a little warning here.
Okay.
A similar thing happened a little later. Another book I read that made it was accompanied by all kinds of understanding coming to me. The book Dracula. That turned out to be a study in the nature of good and evil, which I thought, as being a person studying the light, one also has to know thoroughly about the dark side too.
True.
Yes, I got all kinds of really great information on that too. But apart from that, my writings span a lot about the environment and appropriate technology and sustainable living, because I would later join the Peace Corps and do a tour service in West Africa, where I would apply that. The other metaphysical topics were about the soul, the nature of the soul, as as being a multiplicity in fact.
Mm-hmm.
I did a cross-cultural comparison, um, and find to my surprise, most cultures around the world believe the soul is a multiplicity and not just a unity, which is really what in the Western world it amounts to. So,
Can I ask you, when you say it's a multiplicity, are you referring to like the different archetypes we all hold, or are you referring to how we may be having multi-dimensional experiences, like the soul may be existing in multiple places at once? Or could you clarify what you mean by a multiplicity?
um, well, to say that we are a being here, uh, meaning a body and with a personality, um, and that we have a soul, and 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 we may think of it as something that's just plunked down in our body, uh, but it's not very accurate. I mean this the soul, the reality is more of of you know a suite of souls or a complex of souls, and I've called it the solar complex.
Mm, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely will have to dive into some of those writings of yours as
Yes,
well.
yeah, yes. But the subject today is about the Wizard of Oz, and for me, it's you're talking about this as a metaphor for the spiritual path.
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting because I guess I actually learned this from reading your paper that the author, L. Frank Baum, was a theosophist. So I guess he was a member of the Theosophical Society. Um, and I just was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, you know? And you wrote that he insisted that the story was purely inspirational, coming out of the blue from the great author himself. And I just love that because sometimes I feel like we are just sort of living our lives that way too, you know, where
Yes.
we're bringing that inspiration into physicality and playing out the same hero's journey and the same archetypes, you know.
Yes. Well, well, this is pretty amazing. This synchronicity is that Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula, was also a theosophist.
Oh, and Brahm is his name?
Um, um, Frank, no, yeah, yeah, Bram is his name.
Huh. That's funny. It's kind of similar to bomb a little bit too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's
Now,
what stuck out at me at first. And then I was like,
yeah,
oh, wait, Brahm, no bomb. They're similar. They're not the
uh,
same, but they're
yeah,
similar.
Yeah. First name though, Bram Stoker. Yeah,
Oh,
and Wizard of Oz and Dracula were published within a year or two of each other at the very end of the 19th century.
that is interesting. You know, that makes me, I want to look into the astrology of that time because sometimes we have these like major transits of outer planets that
Mhm.
influence certain writings to come into existence.
Yeah,
So I'd be curious to see where the
I,
planet.
I I've wondered about that. It seems like some those archetypes came in at that time.
Mm,
Two books that have endured over 100 years.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, usually it feels like it's one of the outer planets at work, like Neptune.
Uh-huh.
Neptune usually has a lot to do. It's like the never-ending story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Uh-huh.
yeah, well, I'll have to look that up. That's really interesting.
And in addition to that, I learned for a couple of years I've been studying biodynamics,
Mhm.
uh, which was established by Rudolf Steiner. And Rudolf Steiner started his 25-year marathon of lectures right about the same time those two books came out.
Interesting. You know, he also said, I was listening to a lecture of his a couple days ago, and he said that he believed the Kali Yuga ended in 1899.
Ah, uh-huh.
And I actually feel like, I mean, I don't know. I feel like it's hard to really nail down a date on something as huge as that, but
Mm-hmm.
we definitely are coming out of it. It feels like, which
Uh-huh.
is something I wanted to ask you about because as I'm reading, your article and as I listen to the Book of the Dead, um, it's my perception that our collective is going through a type of dark night of the soul. But that also could just
Uh,
be my perception. But to me, it feels like we need to see the shadows so we can,
mhm.
elevate our consciousness.
Uh,
And
yeah, exactly the point I was trying to make before. Yeah.
yeah, so I love this because like each character in The Wizard of Oz is alchemizing or transmuting uh,
Mm-hmm.
a personal trait into
Yes.
a nobler form. And
Yes.
I feel like as we each individually do this, it contributes to this like collective
Uh-huh.
consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I just think that it's so important for people to, start to, I don't know, just start to open up to these ideas and to, I guess I want to say not fear the shadow, but that's really hard to say because everybody has to go through their own experience.
Mm-hmm.
But there the other thing I always wrestle with is like the dark versus the light. And to me it just feels like the dark or the unconscious has just been so much more prevalent for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
but we're starting to rebalance it. I don't know that we're ever going to transcend it. I don't know how do you feel about that?
Well, I I think it's all according to divine design.
Mm, mhm,
It's we're in a kind of a school and we learn from both the dark and the light sides.
mm. Yeah, and I think I think that might be how we ended up talking about The Wizard of Oz is I
Mhm.
was sharing a dream that I had where
Uh,
I dreamt that my mom was the Wicked Witch and she was just like terrible and awful. And I gave her the
mhm.
book, The Wizard of Oz, and she
Uh-huh.
took it and she read it. And
Uh-huh.
I came back home one day and she was just like totally different. She was like
Uh-huh.
redecorating the house and
Yeah.
putting like nice pillows everywhere and was in this great mood. And I was like, wow, hi. And she was like, hi, thank you so much for giving me that book because
Oh,
I read it and I could see myself. It was like she
yeah.
took that observer perspective where she was like, whoa, look at me and my shadow aspects.
Oh,
And then it was
yeah.
bringing it
Excuse
to,
me.
oh yeah,
Yeah. Excuse me, but what she saw herself, did she specifically mean one of the wicked witches or
yeah, she was the Wicked Witch. And so reading about herself, the Wicked Witch, from that observer perspective, like reading The Wizard of Oz, gave her
hmm
the awareness of herself.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like she was becoming aware of those shadow aspects. And for me, I felt like I was working through that myself. And it was a
Uh-huh.
symbol of me accepting my inner wicked witch.
Uh-huh.
And then I had this like expansion where I was just like, wow, I'm really all of the characters
Mm-hmm.
in the Wizard of Oz. Like I hold all of those
Yeah.
archetypes. And
Uh-huh.
so I think that's how it came up in our conversation. For whatever reason, I shared the dream I had. And then we started talking about the Wizard of Oz. But I think what's cool about this theme is that it's how important the shadow is. And
Uh-huh.
um and what I loved about the Book of the Dead, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, was when they go into these different bardos, the benevolent beings like start to transform into these like demonic looking beings, and they keep just
Uh-huh.
saying, don't be afraid, don't let
Uh-huh.
it, drag you down, don't, it's a projection of the mind. And yeah, I just feel like that's one of the big hurdles that we all have to kind of overcome almost over and over and over in life,
Mm-hmm.
is to see those parts as a part of ourself.
Uh, and the boundaries between the dark beings and light beings are kind of get fused. That
Mm,
it becomes a little hard to distinguish. It's not black and white.
yeah, yeah. So like, I reflect on, current events, and like say you want to demonize like a certain person or a certain group. Do you feel like that person or group, like say it's a political person, do you feel like that person is a reflection of something that we collectively are unconscious of? Because that's a way I've started to look at it.
Um, well, very much so. Uh, I mean, a political leader uh, um, has to depend on resonating uh, with the people he hopes will vote for him.
Hmm.
Uh, so yeah, so he's got to find some kind of chord, to get just right.
Hmm. I remembered there was this part where you said, demons torment us until all the ego's attachments and compulsions have been conquered. Then the demons become our strengths and valuable resources at command. So, what would be a good example of something like, or is there anything in your own life you can think of that has come
Um,
up that you've wrestled with?
um, yes, I guess at this point I should just remind everyone that article I wrote 35 years ago. So,
Hmm.
and I have learned and experienced a lot about the dark side since
Mm, okay.
demons. Yeah, so I've learned a lot. Um, so I would probably revise that a little bit now, but
Okay.
um, yeah. So that's one aspect of what they do. Mm. And helping you, pointing out the things you're attached to that aren't serving you.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and I want to make that distinction, that attachments which aren't serving you anymore versus those that may be appropriate
Hmm.
for the time. Um, yeah, I have to think back, and I alluded to it before. In Montana, I was involved in a relationship, and it was a kind of a whirlwind relationship, and we actually got engaged. And I had met her among one of my Pentecostal groups. She belonged to the group call themselves the charismatic Catholics,
Hmm.
the liberal end of the spectrum.
Uh-huh.
Um, but as time went on, she became more fundamentalistic, while I was becoming more New Ageist,
Hmm.
and the gulf got too wide, and it fell apart. Um, but I just finished my master's degree, and I could have stayed in Montana. I'd found work, but a door was closing, and I the field of geology still hadn't opened up. Uh, couldn't find a job. I was running out of money, so I uh, I moved back east. Um, I left Montana brokenhearted, and um, went back to New Hampshire, having to somehow reinvent my life all over again. And that was my dark night of the soul. And I I would later find uh, you know work to do as a construction materials testing. Um, and it was sort of geology related, doing radiation analysis on soils, and testing concrete that's being poured, and compaction. The soils have been laid down. Um, but later on, uh, after I'd been in the Peace Corps, I was drawn back west again, and again I got involved with a woman there, and it was a whirlwind relationship. It was almost history repeating itself.
Mm.
But after a while, it, it fell apart, um, and I was in a job, but I really disliked it, and so finally uh, I tried my best to make it work. Months longer than I should have, but I finally left and returned to New Hampshire again, going through a dark night of the soul, and having to reinvent my life all over again. Um, so the attachment was um, those relationships mainly,
Mm-hmm.
and they were meant for only for a period, and I needed to let go, and I resisted, and finally I did. But in the first case, coming back from Montana, um, very soon after I got back, um, that's when as I explained, I wrote that article, and the magazine sent me to the Dowser Society as a reporter, and I and began my association with the Dowsers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the second time I returned to New Hampshire, um, and then under the auspices of the American Society of Dowsers, they had formed a committee called the Water for Humanity Fund, and they asked me to join it. And so I joined, and my title was secretary, and much of the time I ended up functioning as a project manager, and I was with that for 19 years. And in that time, the, we went from working in 2 countries to 17 countries.
Wow.
And so we're proud of those accomplishments. And during that time, I did a lot of travels, mainly into Latin America and the Caribbean. 11 different trips in all to teach little farmers to dowse. And and um, and taught them about all aspects of water resources development.
Mm. So you feel like those it almost I can relate with the attachments with relationships. It seems like the more you detached from what was not meant for you, it sounds like the more you were guided on your soul's path, or just opened up a lot of opportunities for you.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
And the doors were closing, and it seems like I was having bad luck, but it really was divine guidance. And you might have thought that it was demons, afflicting me. But once I detached and um, returned to New Hampshire and was open to something else happening. You know, I guess my point is I went through a dark night of soul, the soul uh, and at the same time that was followed by a great gift.
Yeah. It feels like it's often how it goes. I feel like I tend to forget though. Like I always feel like these little like demons or negative thought patterns pop up, and it's usually either accompanying or following or preceding a big expansion in some way. And so it's sometimes it can be hard. Like I literally just went through this again and was like, okay, I'm saying to myself, remember, this is the process. Like it's okay. Just observe them, Don't give them your power.
Right, right. Well, my background in gardening and agriculture, like to make an analogy that um, that pest and disease won't attack a healthy plant. So if I'm spiritually healthy, I won't get these attacks, which seem to be, from demons.
Do you feel like you've gotten to like a point in your life where all of that has leveled out, or do you still go through those kind of waves?
Um, uh, I haven't totally transcended that. I mean, there's, you know, uh, if if there are still seems like those demons are there. They're still an indication to me that I don't have totally the spiritual health that I like.
That's interesting because
Yeah.
I guess I don't have a strong opinion about it. I think what I had already just assumed though that would always come up. I guess because we're human, you know?
Yeah. But I see a definite pattern with a positive here. Is in I've been primarily a water dowser, but after a while I began to add another application to that, and that's the dowsing of natural earth energy zones, both positive and negative. And I was drawn to do that because I began to suspect in some of my wells that didn't turn out as well as I hoped or expected, that I might have been problem might have been some of the earth energies on the property that might have been interfering.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so in doing that, I found that that some of those negative energy zones have negative entities attached to them. So and those had to be dealt with too. And I found that I had the ability to clear those negative energy entities from the property and do it easily.
Wow.
Um, so I must have, with all I've been through, gained um, um, kind of experience and a kind of authority over that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because
Mhm.
it's almost like you have to, the experience makes you less fearful, which makes you able to do that, right? Because it's like, if you go in afraid, you're just bait, right?
Yep. Oh yes, yeah. Control that fear for sure, and you learn too to call in, all the spiritual guidance and protection that you have available to you.
Mm,
So you have that support in back of you,
I love that.
and uh, and you also work in a different way than in the old days, where you, you go in with your thumping your Bible and uh, damn these beings and try and drive them back to hell.
Mm.
My system is totally different than that.
I'm going to guess that you're probably sending them back to source light or something like that.
Um, yes, well, first of all, I don't go in um, with condemnation
Mm.
or
Hmm.
judgment. Um, I go in more with compassion,
Hmm.
understand that they're 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 acting according to their nature.
Hmm.
Um, and they actually don't have free will, you know,
Interesting.
according to their nature.
Huh.
And so um, I, going in with that way, not with judgment, and uh, not in a threatening way at all. Um, I point out to them that they, like every other being in the universe, has at least a tiny spark of light at their core.
Mhm.
And I invite them to look at that and acknowledge it, and then I prompt that little spark of light to grow a bit, and they can see that it is not hurting them like they've been told it would hurt
Mhm.
them, and that it can make them actually feel very good, and it can, and letting that grow could um, result in a very different kind of future for them, and much, much more appealing. And so, you know, then they become receptive to um, converting to follow the light.
Mm.
And um, so, but I wouldn't uh, just send them to the light directly. Uh, and I ask, invite them to go toward the light or their next stage of development, because
Mm.
they just might not be able to handle, going directly to the light all at once. You might have to
Yeah.
go stages.
Oh, wow. That is so fascinating.
Mhm.
And I love that too. It feels like such a metaphor for us humans as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
Just
Mhm.
treating them as you're
Yeah.
treating them with humanity.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
And when I was reading your article, when I was reading about the yellow brick road, I was seeing a labyrinth. And
Oh. Yeah.
it just this journey reminds me, it sounds like these negative energies you're talking about, it's almost like they're on the outside of the labyrinth, and
Mhm.
and they need to like make their way back to the center.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And that's what the Wizard of Oz feels like, that journey. The Book of the Dead feels like that journey. It's that journey to within and to the truth. But then we come back out. And it's so funny. I have to tell you, like, after listening to the Book of the Dead, I'm like, okay, so what's the point then? It kind of like me like that. Like, okay, if I'm at peace, what do I do here on Earth then? Like, like you can get to this point where obviously I'm not going to stop doing things, but it made me ask that question. Okay, so what am I here to do? Once I've realized that I am a divine being, that I have a soul that is here living a human experience, then what am I doing?
Well, I've had that same thing going on in me too. But I have found the answer, which I think totally satisfies me.
Okay.
So Rudolf Steiner said, summing up, the whole reason for our being here, and our whole purpose on our journey and on this planet, it can all be summed up by saying we are here to spiritualize matter and materialize spirit.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me. It makes total sense. So then it's up to you, I guess, how you want to do that. And we each have the choice to either align our will with divine will or not. I would choose to align with divine will myself.
Yes.
But yeah, I really love that. It was funny after reading the Book of the Dead, it felt like it was so focused on transcending this experience. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I feel like if you transcend this experience, then you're not taking advantage of this experience. And, like the transcendent moments are amazing. But I was, that it left me with that impression. And I was kind of like, so then what do you do if you've transcended,
Yes. We can transcend it right here on Earth. Make heaven on Earth. And both transcend and transmute.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Something else that popped out at me in your article was the Tin Man and his dismemberment. Because we see that like in the myth of Osiris and Isis. Are you familiar with that one, the Egyptian?
No, I'm not.
Okay. It's funny because for whatever reason, if it's past life related, I don't know what it is, but my tendency is to go towards like Egyptian mythology. And that's just like, feels like remembering for me, which remember, this is where it comes from. Like, in that myth as well, Osiris is dismembered by his brother Set, and Isis, the divine feminine, has to go and collect all of his pieces and remember him. So it's that returning of the divine feminine intuitive side that helps him come back, and then he becomes like a Lord of the Dead or Lord of the Underworld. And I was thinking about how the Tin Man, he didn't have a heart, so it was like that was the part that he was looking for, which I also love how the wizard at the end gives them all these little substitutes for like what they're looking for.
Uh-huh.
But they all had what they were looking for within them the
They
whole
did.
time. Yeah.
They had it, but they developed it more and ennobled those aspects.
Yeah. And you know, it came actually, I remembered there was another part I really liked that sort of comes back to my last question. It was like, oh, here it is. Dorothy's forgetfulness was necessary, for otherwise the three companions would not
Mm-hmm.
have made their gains
Mm-hmm.
and acquired kingdoms to rule. So I was like, okay, so maybe that's the point. Maybe that's why
Yeah,
we keep
yeah,
coming back here.
right, right, right.
Lead each
So
other home.
I want to say something about the Tin Woodsman's dismemberment. Well,
Yeah, yeah, please.
um, so what I think of when I um, read about that is in shamanism, they talk about us losing soul pieces, soul,
Mm,
soul pieces. I don't
yeah.
know. Um, with each abuse experience or trauma endure or whatever, uh, that it's a kind of response um, to trauma is to eject a little piece of your soul, because to be fully embodied, you feel things so intensely um, that you have to eject a piece of your soul to withstand it.
Right.
But those pieces of souls are still out there drifting around somewhere and can be retrieved. But uh, the Tin Woodsman experienced so many pieces lost that he was replaced um, completely by tin.
Mm, yeah, that is super interesting. I've definitely had an experience in my own life where it felt like my whole reality was shattered, like my whole
Oh, yeah,
being.
yeah,
So
uh-huh,
I relate with that. Like that's why I
uh-huh,
related with the Isis and Osiris myth so much, because
hmm
when that happens, sometimes it can be so extreme. That's the moment that sets us on this path of
hmm
putting the
hmm
pieces back together,
yeah, yeah,
you know.
yeah. So maybe we should put this in perspective that Dorothy represents um, someone who has come back in to reincarnate. Um, and and that he's come in, but has to gather these aspects of
Mhm.
thinking, feeling, and courage to act,
Mhm.
um, in order to have a well-rounded personality and being. Um, and she comes in and and the order is important. She finds a scarecrow first. Um, and each of those are associated also with an element. She finds the scarecrow up high on a pole, up high in the air.
Mhm.
So scarecrow is associated with air,
Mhm.
and he's looking for a brain. So obviously that's thinking. And they next find the Tin Woodsman rusted by water in,
Mhm.
um, in the forest, and uh, so um, the Tin Woodsman is feeling, and he and you only get this in the book. They don't show that how sentimental he was. He was very careful not even to step on a bug. If he did, he was very, very disturbed with it.
Mhm.
Uh, Um, so, yeah, um, so that was to add feeling to the mix, and together they all the four form a fraternity. Um, so the Tin Woodsman adds feeling, and also during the journey they develop each other's their aspects, and the Tin Woodsman's sentimentality becomes more compassion, their aspect. It's like the Scarecrow's um, thinking becomes wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And then they meet the Cowardly Lion, who is needing to develop his will and courage to act, uh, which in a lower form, he try to intimidate people with his roar and, and cause them to react. But in a higher aspect, he could, have a more, a better way of getting along with people, um, and be able to act on his own. So, and that leaves Dorothy, what she represents, and she is intuition. So,
and then Toto is interesting. I think of my own dog. Like I think of how when he wakes up in the morning, he's just so happy it's a new day. I'm just like, I want to be like you. Like you get it. You're just pure love.
Toto is interesting. The four companions, they fit on they form a mandala. The form of a mandala is a circle with a point in the middle and a line that goes north-south, another line that goes east-west. So there's four directions. And so where do you put Toto? Well, Toto belongs in the center. Represents the transcendent function. And in the book, we learned that that Toto is the only thing in Kansas that's not just gray. Toto is black. But in Oz, they have never seen a dog before, so it doesn't really belong in either realm, but his job is, the in-between. It's Toto is all the represents all the karma that Dorothy is carrying in with her in this incarnation. And I believe this is story of Dorothy's, not only her incarnation, but her last incarnation. So her house landing on the Wicked Witch of the East means she has overcome her urge for rebirth. Once she just wants to get back again.
Yeah, and then she ends up defeating the Wicked Witch of the West by becoming enraged and dousing her in water.
Yes.
And then she like melts away, which is it's so interesting. It's like finally conquering that inner dragon.
That was Wicked Witch of the West symbolized the fear of death and the fear of your ego dissolution. Yes, she was doused by water and melted away. But do you remember how the about the Wicked Witch of the East. She dried up in the sun.
Hmm.
So there's fire in the east and water on the west.
Yeah. I also just think like too much of one or the other, and you're in trouble.
Mm,
Like about finding that
uh-huh,
balance too, right?
uh-huh. Mhm, mhm,
Yeah. And then the wizard, I love the wizard character because he's like I feel like he represents God to these people.
mhm.
Um and he's like, why is everybody like depending on me and like asking me for all this stuff, that they already have within them. And he says, I'm a really good man, just a very bad wizard.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, he went to great lengths to keep the deception going,
Hmm.
to the point that he made everybody in Oz wear those green glasses, so they'd all see the way he wanted them to see.
The green glasses made me think of like our cell phones and TV today.
Uh-huh.
Like he has everyone in Oz put on these green spectacles because he claims that the light is too brilliant or too bright for them to see.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
And so it just kind of reminds me, like when I think of, I mean, I'm not saying all TV and all social media is bad, but like, you do see a lot of perpetuation of separation in media that
Mm-hmm.
keeps us divided and keeps us from seeing, the more positive ways that we do connect. So
Mm-hmm.
I thought about that when I was reading about the spectacles. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know if you have any thoughts on
Well,
that.
well, well, I think you're right. This just seems there's a lot of perspectives competing with the right way to see what they think is the right way to see things.
Hmm. Yeah, and then even, you know, that even gets interesting with because it's true we all have different perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
based on
Mm-hmm.
our own experience. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I have to say I feel like, I talk to people who say there is no such thing as truth. And that's really hard for me because I do believe that there is at least one truth, and that the one truth is that we're all connected. And if everybody believed that, then we would understand natural law. We would
Mm-hmm.
understand karma. Like we would understand so much more,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think there are some truths that you can say is absolute.
Yeah. Oh, and I also what cracked me up was the Emerald City is left ruled by the Scarecrow, a stuffed man, which is like a spoof on authority.
Yeah, that that's yeah, that's kind of a spoof. Uh, yeah, yes, yeah, the Wizard of Oz is kind of what he's demonstrating is the ego that reigns as sup the superior authority.
Mhm.
And in the story, that's that um, dictatorship of the ego had to be uh, dismantled.
Mhm. I feel like we're kind of seeing that in the outer world right now. Like we're about to sort of experience that as a collective,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which will be really interesting.
Uh-huh.
Um, because I do feel like just with all of the things that have sort of accelerated within the past 3 years, it just feels like things have gotten so confusing
Mm-hmm.
that people are just going to have to be driven within and take their power back, you know. Not
Uh-huh.
that not that you know that's going to happen for everyone. Um but that's my lens that I see like happening in the world
Yeah.
right
Yeah. Well, it it doesn't have to begin with everybody all at once.
now.
Um,
Yeah.
um, we can hope for the reach the threshold at which it will spread very quickly from there.
Mm-hmm. Like a certain percentage
Uh,
of people or
like, say the 100th monkey effect.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there because I feel like, you know, we're all if you compare like the brain with the collective consciousness, it's like to develop a new pattern, you have to establish new neural pathways or neural pathways. And so it feels like the more people who hop onto these neural pathways of healing trauma and deconditioning, it's like those
Mhm.
pathways get more and more worn in until it's easier for other people to see that as a part of their reality
Uh-huh.
or a part of what is, you know, more automatic, I guess I could say, or
I
natural.
don't know if you've heard that quote from Albert Einstein, that you can't solve a problem with the same kind of mind that caused the problem in the first place.
Yeah. So
Uh,
here we come back to the scarecrow,
yeah,
the
uh-huh,
mind.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then you said in the article, when we realize our soul, we acquire our Dharmakaya or divine body of truth. And this is represented by Uncle Henry and Aunt Em coming together. And I saw that as
Mhm.
like and I think you say this too, as like the divine masculine and the divine feminine. It's like
Mhm.
that Hieros Gamos or like that divine union.
Uh-huh.
And I was
Yeah.
even seeing like the Holy Grail and that's I was also seeing like the symbol of the Son of God, like Horus or Christ
Uh-huh.
consciousness.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Represented nirvana or the void.
Yeah, and that even it's so funny, like the concepts of nirvana and samsara, and the way that you juxtapose them in your article was really interesting to me because I think in my mind I would have thought of Kansas as the illusion and Oz as the truth.
Uh-huh.
So that was really interesting to see how you framed it, you know?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Um, yeah, it's the void where all things come from in the first place.
The
Oh.
soil, right? The soil, the soul.
That's right.
You also wrote the Bardo Tadal teaches that the soul's liberation is already accomplished and has only to be realized. Until then, one makes himself a prisoner of samsara, the phenomenal universe, which includes the heavens and the hells.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's interesting when you kind of take that journey and you see that it's all projections of your own consciousness.
Mhm.
Again, I come back to this like, you know, how do you navigate? So like I guess I'll ask you because you said it's been like 35 years since you wrote this and you said
Mhm.
you have sort of a greater understanding of the dark side. Um what has that greater understanding taught you? I think you said something about boundaries.
Mhm. My the a better understanding of the dark side.
Yeah, like what have you learned in that respect? Because when you read the Book of the Dead, it's definitely like showing you the dark side as like the demons and to
Mm-hmm.
not fear them.
Yeah.
But we still live in this, we still live amongst all of it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
then is that just how you navigate the world is
Mm-hmm.
you
Well,
observe
well,
and
well, from what I've studied, um, that the dark side doesn't work with in a totally um, totally free way. They're bound by certain rules, um, just like the Dracula in that book.
Mhm.
Um, you know, it's
Oh yeah, you can't come out during the day.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's okay. Yeah, I
Hmm.
got you.
Hmm. Um, so ultimately, the God is in control of everything. Um, and so in the story of the Wizard of Oz, the dark side is helping the companions develop their abilities by sending these things at them,
Mhm.
obstacles and adversaries.
Mhm.
It's interesting to point out that the yellow brick road uh, didn't um, didn't go through their whole journey. That yellow brick road only um, went from where she landed in Munchkin Land
Mhm.
uh, to the gates of the Emerald City, and there it ended.
Mhm.
Um, so I'd like to ask the listeners here, um, knowing that there's a difference between the book and the movie, uh, as a trivia question. In the movie, the give it away. The slippers were red.
Yeah.
What color were the shoes in the book? And they were silver. And
Mhm.
that's the alchemist symbolism in the story. So walking on the road of gold with silver shoes.
Mhm.
Um, but the, the meaning of that was they were traveling on the Yellow Brick Road for that part of the journey because they were still spiritual babes at that time.
Mm.
So a lot of divine protection. Um, so and guidance. So they face their adversaries um, and and uh, and figured out how to get past their obstacles. Um, and and some there are definitely some divine intervention there.
Mhm.
So the there's a uh, demonic thing at work throwing these things at them. It was their function to help them develop.
Mhm.
After they left um, Emerald City, it was all totally different. There was no yellow brick road anymore, not even a road at all. They had to just find their way, just just heading west. They were warned that uh, they didn't know quite now how they would find the Wicked Witch of the West, but surely she would find out where they were. And so they talked about the Wicked Witch of the West with her one eye.
Mhm. Or
Look,
third.
you can see she has a patch over one eye.
Hmm.
Eye is really maybe
That's
the the third eye and the
yeah, you know what's interesting though too is that if you can only see through one eye, then you're out of balance. Like if you
uh-huh.
have a patch
Yeah.
over one, that third
Mm-hmm.
eye isn't really that wholesome because you're missing one
Uh-huh.
side of the story, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, so in the book, the Wicked Witch threw all kinds of uh, you know, things under her command at them to try to destroy them.
Mhm.
Um, I think the first thing was the wolves, and the Tin Man chopped the heads off all of them. And there was I remember that she sent 40 wolves, and I wondered why exactly 40.
Mhm.
So they got past that, and next the Wicked Witch of the West sent the crows to peck out their eyes, and there were 40 of them. So I'm still puzzling on that. But
The thing I think of first, and I don't know that this is related, but what comes to my mind first is the 40 days in the desert. Uh,
mm-hmm,
yeah, that's the
yeah,
only significance I can think of with
yeah,
40 on its
yeah.
own.
That that occurred to me too, trying to see how it fits.
Yeah.
Um, so they somehow they must have had divine guidance and inspiration on how to meet these things. They um, they now have all their aspects fully operational. And
Mhm.
they're well, yeah, I should back up and say one of the big things accomplished by the time they got to Emerald City was not only did they develop their aspects, but they learned to integrate them.
Mm.
So they were all integrated and they're working, cooperatively to overcome these adversaries sent at them.
Mhm.
But they foil everything, and it's left for the Wicked Witch of the West to try her last resort, and that was to send the winged monkeys. And they were under the command of the Wicked Witch of the West.
Mhm.
Um, and that's because she had this thing called the golden cap,
Mhm.
and and um, and that golden cap gives her three commands that she can do with that cap, and only three. And she had always, she'd
I'm
all,
sorry. I wanted to ask you, do you have any idea why there's only three commands?
well, I know three is a divine number.
Yeah.
Um, but
No worries if I just wondered if
yeah,
you had wondered about that as
yeah,
well.
uh-huh, yeah. Like say, there's the divine has rules that they must follow,
Yeah.
and that must have been one,
Hmm.
three, and that's it. Um, so she only had one left, and she was using up her last command and sending the winged monkeys. That's why that was only a last resort.
Hmm.
And those succeeded nodding into throwing the Tin Woodsman down from a great height onto the rocks, and pulling apart the straw out of the scarecrow, and capturing the lion. And but they couldn't hurt um, Dorothy herself because she had the kiss of protection on her forehead by the Good Witch of the North, as she started her journey on the Yellow Brick Road. But she was imprisoned in witch's castle. So those the, the demons, if you could call them all that in different forms, had kind of a different function at that time. Not to help them develop, but sent at them by the Wicked Witch of the West, as like the person about to end the life and fearing ego dissolution will do anything in its power to prevent that.
Mm-hmm. And it also reminds me of like when you, like we were talking about earlier, when you have these expansions and all these little kind of demons come up, it's almost like the ego being like, no, don't leave me behind. You know, like, I want to be here too. I don't want to die. That is kind of different from the labyrinth. Like there is not a direct path back out. It's sort of like you're then navigating with this, with these integrations and with this like divine intelligence. And it's really up to you how you navigate it. And when you were talking about the beginning of their journey, I just saw the Fool card, like from the tarot. I feel like there could somebody might have even written something about, you know, the Wizard of Oz and the journey of the tarot. Who knows? But the major arcana of the tarot also, you know, show you this journey in a way. And I just see like the Fool is off with no inhibitions. He could like fall off a cliff, but he's not going to, because he's got that innocence and that like divine protection.
As along the way on the Olympic Road, she meets the companions. And they all agree to go ahead, you know, not totally naive. And, you know, what do they got to lose? And everything to gain. And then when Dorothy and her companions leave the Emerald City to go to confront the Wicked Witch of the West. Wow, that was really the like you say, on the Fool, just totally in faith. Totally in faith that somehow they'll be guided and somehow they'll accomplish it.
Yeah. Yeah, this is giving me more clarity on my earlier questions. I love it. And I feel like it's such a cool conversation to have, because I think that a lot of people right now are opening up on this journey, and it can feel like you can feel kind of lost sometimes, or like for me personally, I see like a million different directions I could go, and I'm trying to choose, you know? So it's like learning to sort of let go and go with the flow, but also not give up that free will, you know?
Yeah.
Quite the balancing act.
Right. So this little girl had the task put before her to cross this land with no road, to confront a wicked witch who had enslaved anyone that ever attempted anything like that before, and and she had to kill the witch, and in the book it doesn't say anything about a broomstick, but but that was a good addition of the movie, I think.
Yeah.
and no idea how in the world she would do that. And the way it happened was um, not by her conscious, planning or anything.
Mm-hmm.
It happened when she was enslaved in the in the castle, and she had worn her silver shoes at all times, to protect them and keep them safe. But the Wicked Witch um, thought up a trick to make her trip over something, and uh, one shoe fell off, and she grabbed it, and it so enraged Dorothy that she grabbed a bucket of water and threw it on the witch, not knowing that was the thing that would destroy the witch.
Right. It wasn't like she intentionally killed her.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was divine guidance, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and she had a faith that for something like that to happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you said also like at the end of the story, her as she heads home, her silver shoes fall off
Yes.
and they're lost forever in the desert.
Yeah.
And then her final return to spirit, they're no longer needed.
Yeah. That's, the silver shoes had the power to return over the great desert, and then they not needed anymore. That was her final incarnation.
And I love how she was wearing the silver shoes the whole time,
Mm-hmm.
and like
Yeah.
she had to go through the journey though. Like nobody was gonna, she
Mm-hmm.
wasn't supposed to know the shortcut home. She was supposed to take
Yeah.
the whole journey.
Right. Well, I, in rereading this, or, to prepare for this interview, um, I read that she was happy to take the silver shoes that which the Good Witch of the North offered her, um, because the shoes she did have were pretty worn out, and she was glad that these silver shoes would not wear out.
Yeah. Huh. Wow. I love that.
Yeah.
It's like you can always count on the soul and the soul's
Yeah.
guidance. But then it was like it's really interesting too still to think about that with the shoes coming off. It's like I guess that's
Mm-hmm.
the integration, right? Like not seeing it
Mm-hmm.
outside of yourself.
Right.
Man, so
Uh,
cool. I really appreciate you writing this and like and coming here today. I know you're really busy. So I really appreciate it. And I'm still just like, it's so much to take in. Like I feel like you could read it over and over and over and get
oh,
something new every time.
definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
So I would encourage the listeners, if you haven't read the book, um, please do. You'll be glad you did. You know, um, everyone's seen the movie, but there's a lot more in the book as well.
Totally.
And so people that have only seen the movie don't realize that after um, the Wicked Witch of the West was dissolved, um, there was more to the story after that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, they
Yeah,
didn't
I
put any of
mean,
that in there.
yeah, yeah. So they did go back to Emerald City, and then to uncover the Wizard of Oz, reign as ego,
Mhm.
um, was that part. But in the book, she still had to go. Um, in the movie, Glinda, the Good Witch of the South, came to her, but in the movie, Dorothy and her companions had to go to the red country um, of where uh, Glinda lived and and find her there.
Hmm. Yeah,
Mm,
and there's the different countries that represent their different colors.
yes.
And they went to four different countries, right? I can't
Um,
remember.
well, yeah, in the in the movie, you know,
In
she,
the book.
well, both in the book and the movie, she
Oh,
went
okay.
blue Munchkin country,
Okay.
and then they go on the Yellow Brick Road to Emerald City, which uh, was right in the center of Oz, and that was green.
Uh-huh.
Um, and and they uh, neither of the book or the movie did they go to the purple country to the north, ruled by the Good Witch of the North. Uh,
Okay.
but the Good Witch of the North was there in Munchkin country when she landed with a house
Okay. So it's like working
connection.
down the chakras
Uh,
with the
oh, yeah, you are catching my point already.
yeah.
The sequence um, follows the colors of the chakras from the crown down.
Okay.
She she uh, she confronts the Wicked Witch of the West in the yellow country, and then ends up in the red country in the south. So it goes down to the root, ends at the root chakra.
That's interesting that it works from the top down, you know? I don't
Yes,
know why I would think they would work from the root up, but
the the way the Kundalini usually works is the rising up,
right.
but the point was um, written across the point made somewhere that it also can go down.
Hmm. I also kind of see like the soul descending into the body, you know, like the
Hmm.
higher self, like the
Hmm.
embodiment, maybe
Hmm.
that could be
Hmm.
a representation there as well.
Well, through the work I did on what I call the solar complex,
Hmm.
when I started that, um, I was looking to find a pattern, wanted to compare as many cultures as possible.
Hmm.
They believed about how many souls there are and what they do in their nature and all. Thinking that if I looked at enough of them, I would start to see a pattern and enough that have you know commonality to them that you I begin to see a core reality
Hmm.
happen and I saw that uh, the non-physical aspects of a human being are fourfold and and um, and one of the things I found where it matched well was with Rudolf Steiner,
Hmm.
also the Kabbalah, and surprisingly from um, Buddhan, um, and many others. But um, and these four aspects are in the Bible too.
Mm.
Um, so basically, it's the lowest being the etheric body, also known as the life force body,
Hmm.
and and then going further up, then is the soul. Above that is the spirit, but the spirit is kind of divided into two aspects. The lower one is the one that um, uh, is in both divine and in our realm too, and the highest is of our purely divine self that remains, in the upper realm.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, because there's, I'm throwing around all these terms without really even definitions, So
Yeah.
I appreciate you explaining that.
Uh-huh.
And I find it fascinating too.
Uh-huh.
Something else that's come to me when I've read things like your article or even like the Egyptian Book of the Dead is a part of this journey being sort of like helping us to gain either our etheric or our astral body. I'm not sure which one you would equate it to, but this body that sort of travels between here and that highest point.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's a part of this journey.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I tend to think of it as the soul's it's like extensionism,
Mm,
like the process of incarnation is um, extending from the purely divine soul to the human divine soul to uh, to this soul we normally think of, and then our life force body.
mm. Maybe that's why it gets so confusing sometimes because you get
Yes,
all these
yes.
different levels of
Hmm.
opinions or
Yes.
guidance.
Yeah. Hmm. And so it gets even harder to grasp when you think that you know that uh, that divine part of us can extend down and incarnate in more than one body at a time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I had a dream one time that was so realistic that I had to wonder if it was a parallel life. And
Ah, huh?
it was just like because it wasn't super fantastical like a lot of dreams are. It was
Hmm.
very realistic and I felt like I was there. But and the person in the dream was experiencing something similar to what I've experienced in my life, but a different story.
Hmm.
And this actually happened when I was on a yoga retreat. Like I
Ah,
went to it was what's Kripalu in
hmm.
Western Mass and
Yeah.
sort of had like I guess a mini awakening there. And
Uh-huh.
we went to this talk that was led by a shaman, and he induced us into like a shamanic trance with his drum. And
Uh-huh.
that was the first time I had really like started to see things in my mind's eye. And as I was going to sleep that night, I just heard that drum beat. And when I had that dream that night, so it was almost like I was traveling to a parallel existence of mine or
Uh-huh.
something. It's I'm
Um,
just now putting that together.
did it feel like this same time, uh, in
uh
time period,
it
or
could have been because it wasn't a long time ago. Like if anything, the like it may have been like the 90s or the early 2000s, but it felt recent.
hmm.
It
Hmm.
didn't feel ancient. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah. And it was in Mexico. So, which is weird because I've I've always felt this resonance with Mexican culture as well. I grew up in
Uh-huh.
Texas, so that's a part of it, but I think that goes back to some ancient times, but then there was that experience as well. So
Yeah.
anyway, it's fascinating. I do think that we can have these parallel lives. And I've even, met a friend who lives in the middle of the country, or was living in like Michigan, and experienced a lot of the same life steps that I have, and I'm just like, what? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how is it that our journeys have been so similar and we have this
Uh-huh.
really deep connection?
Uh-huh.
And, it just feels like, I don't know how else to explain it than like soul family, or
Uh-huh.
or what you're
Yeah.
saying is like this
Yeah.
other multiple of your soul. Yeah, that's making a lot of things click for me, if you can't already tell.
Uh,
But I wanted to ask you, do you identify more with any of the characters in the Wizard of Oz, or do you like, is there any you lean towards, or do you feel like you fully embody all of them?
uh, well, I can really relate to every one of them, but I think mostly Dorothy,
Mhm.
because um, she is the one that has intuition is one most basic. And I think, and when we come into a lifetime, we then we have to after arriving here, we start um, developing our intellect and our feelings and our will. Um, so it takes time for a soul to develop.
Mhm.
But yeah, I can relate as I mentioned when I got out of high school, I just took a few years off and I went traveling and did my adventuring. That seemed like the cowardly lion part,
Mhm.
developing courage. And one thing I did was I did skydiving, and uh, and I made about 98 jumps before I finally uh, was done with that period. Um, but that and no, we talked about fear of death, and I felt like I had a fear of death, and one of the reasons I did it was to try and get over that.
That's amazing. I would love to claim I don't fear death, but I have to say I would never skydive. Maybe I just don't want to die that way.
Uh-huh. That would not be a pretty way to go.
No, I guess it might be painless. It might be pretty quick though.
Quick, yes. Um, and also, um, I can relate to the scarecrow, because once I was done with that period of adventuring, then I felt called to go to college, and I ended up getting 2 degrees, and so that was my getting a brain, I guess.
I love it.
Yeah, and then and the Tin Woodman I can relate to, as the experiences that can cause you to eject different parts of yourself until uh, you feel lacking, and,
Mhm.
and draw them back again somehow.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, and but mostly um, I relate to Dorothy and her overall journey.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about it for myself, and I feel similarly. I definitely feel like now I resonate, a lot with Dorothy. As we were talking though, I was like, reflecting back, I was having these memories when I was a little kid. Um, my mom was obsessed with the Wizard of Oz. And so I think
Yeah.
that's probably why I ended up sort of being raised being enthusiastic about it as well, because she was the Wicked Witch one year for Halloween, scared the crap out of me. She did her makeup so well and came out cackling like her. I was like 3 years old, and I ran away, and she was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. It's me, like she did too good of a job on her makeup." But
Oh,
I have pictures from when I was little. I was the Cowardly Lion 3 years in a row. That was the costume I was obsessed with.
uh-huh.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to wear it all the time. And then I have this picture of like Christmas morning, and I got ruby red slippers for Christmas,
Uh-huh.
and I'm wearing them, and I have like a piece of wrapping paper stuck to my knee. Like it's kind of
Uh-huh.
a funny picture. And I remember being in my backyard as a little kid, and the wind would be blowing super hard, and
Uh-huh.
I would I would roam around the yard going Toto, Toto. So I have all these
Mhm.
memories where it's like
Mhm.
melted into my own life.
Yeah, yes.
And I just also remember, being little and watching that movie, and growing up and more pieces coming together, like, oh, the guys in the beginning of the movie are the Scarecrow and the Tin Man and like
Uh-huh.
I started putting
Yes.
the pieces together, and it made me want to watch it more, because I was like, what else am I not
Mhm.
getting about this movie? Like there was
Mhm.
something in me that knew
Uh-huh.
there
Yeah.
was something deeper there. And yeah, and then I've got pictures of my mom as a Tin Man too, which is funny.
Oh, yeah.
So, and she did all the silver makeup. I mean,
Yeah.
it was,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm gonna have to probably post some of these pictures on
Uh-huh.
my Instagram to go along
Yeah.
after this episode, because
I,
it's too funny.
I really have to hand it to your mother, uh, that she embraced her dark side so well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess she did.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Uh, and it wasn't until, I guess, no, I mean, I wouldn't say more recently. I definitely went through phases of that. I've been on some similar journeys to you, traveling around and doing risky things, and then just following that yellow
Mhm.
brick road as
Mhm.
we all
Uh-huh.
do.
All right. All right.
Yep. Yeah. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to touch on or share about the article?
Um, I I think I covered just about all the notes I had here that were important points. Um, that and yeah, I guess my point is about demons that um, is, it's more like they form a whole spectrum, um, and they have different kinds of duties and different kinds of things that they do for us. Or, um, I feel that that's the part I need to flesh out more.
Yeah, that part can get kind of confusing, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Because it's like, I guess that's a part of our will, is directing our will. Well, it's like you said, it's not about condemning. It's about directing the will. I like to think of it as directing our will to create, and to create
Hmm.
new models. Like, was it Buckminster Fuller that said, to make the old models, we've got to make the old models obsolete. We've got to develop new ones that make those old
Uh-huh.
ones
Uh-huh.
obsolete. And so I feel like that's a form of bringing the divine into form, and vice versa.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
like evolution, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, those demons, they're always there.
Yeah.
It seems like.
And there's a whole hierarchy. Not only is there a spectrum, but there's a whole hierarchy.
Mm,
Steiner points that out. Everything about the spiritual world, both light and dark, is a hierarchy. Mm.
that
Uh,
is interesting. I've never explored the darker hierarchies
yeah,
before.
yeah. So there's those demons that are, you know, working our lives closely with us, whether we know it or not. Um, and then there are higher levels that are, um, that more of an concern of us as a species. That all humanity have to be concerned about.
Mm,
Rudolf Steiner referred to them as the adversarial powers,
mm,
and uh, their goal is to trip up our evolution of a species, our positive progression towards evolving,
hmm
and it's really, really important, and I guess very important to end with here that um, that it's important that we in the West, in our materialistic society, is that we get to think about more of the greater reality around us,
hmm
um, that we can't see, the unseen world, and and how how that affects us, um, and that we have to pay more attention to those realms, especially those adversarial powers, and recognize when they're working to trip up our evolution,
hmm
and the evolution of the earth itself depends on this too.
hmm
Earth's evolution depends on our evolution. Um, uh, a lot of things are happening in this world that's really scary. All the crises that we're facing.
hmm
We need to learn more about these realms and know how they interact with us, and so we can, you know, learn to evolve, uh, continue evolving in a positive direction.
hmm
It seems like that's in jeopardy right now.
Yeah, I agree. A part of me sees that because it can be hard to get somebody to understand what you're talking about if they haven't experienced it. So sometimes
Mhm.
I feel like it's just going to have to be experienced in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I think that sharing our voices and um, sharing better models is a way to contribute,
Mm-hmm.
um, just better options. I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's what something that, I think everybody struggles with when they start to see, when they start to witness the like darker
Uh,
forces that are there, is
uh,
that
uh-huh.
they want to tell everybody. And um and it's hard. You got to strike that balance of like where are
Mm-hmm.
people at and what are they open to hear
Yeah.
about. And so that's something that definitely I feel like a lot of people are navigating, because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people, these darker forces are so obvious at this point,
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
to other people they're still not. And so in some ways I see it playing out where things just have to get worse for people to wake
Mm-hmm.
up and see it.
Yeah.
But I also think simultaneously, I think there's so many amazing souls that are working towards creating better models and that'll be
Yes.
another avenue
Yes.
that people follow. So I obviously am like an eternal optimist. Like that's just a part of
Uh-huh.
my design. I'm definitely
Yeah.
not ignorant to the dark
I
forces
I
at all.
resonate with that too.
Yeah, good. I'm glad.
Uh-huh.
We need optimists too.
Mhm.
Because I see, I see so many warriors out there, which I guess we need too. They're doing
Mhm.
their job. It's like everybody's playing a different role,
Mhm.
until it's like these archetypes. Everybody's playing out the different ones, and who
Mhm.
knows if we'll ever come to a point where we're all integrated into the one again. I mean, if that happened, then the story would be over, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah, that is the goal, to reach that point.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, see, that's the thing I question though sometimes. Is that my goal? Do I want it, like, do I want the story to be over? Or is the story okay as long as we don't destroy ourselves?
mm, um, well, we began as one, um, and we first di divided um, ourselves, the one, into many, many, and at the same time divided between male and female,
Mhm.
established a polarity, um, and to go full circle, then we'd end up that way. But I believe that we would retain our sense of being an individual.
Mhm.
Um, maybe not necessarily the personality ego of each incarnation, but the greater you.
I gotcha.
Yeah, you with a capital Y.
Yeah. Okay. I like where you're going with this because I
Mhm.
I do, we obviously are like all these different fragments,
Mhm.
and I like that I feel like I'm experiencing this journey of individuation, like really figuring out what my unique fragment is. And that's well, that's funny. That's kind of the
Yeah,
ego
yeah,
again. It's like I
yeah.
don't want to lose that.
Yeah, yeah. I think that that's a terrific point to make at this point. Um, that the thing to do would be to discover ourselves as you as who you are.
Mhm.
You know, you with a capital Y.
Mhm. Yeah. Yep. I think it's kind of all divinely laid out for us as long as we eventually answer that call. If we
Mm-hmm.
don't, something's going to happen.
Uh,
Where
uh, uh,
Yeah, but I definitely feel like I don't know when we'll see it, but I definitely see uh I can see a future that is more connected to nature and connected to the soul.
mhm,
I do
mhm,
feel I see enough people moving in that direction that will get there at some point.
mhm.
I don't know what happens to uh the people who choose otherwise, but they're always welcome to hop on
Uh,
the boat, right?
well, we all have to get there together, you know. Um, everybody's got to come together.
Yeah.
So, um, there and nobody is going to be rejected or considered, you know, too far gone to be, you know, brought along anymore. Uh, um, anyone, everyone is redeemable.
Mm, Wow. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Mhm. Oh, you're welcome.